Good morning. This lab is designed to show how to set up a Raspberry Pi. We're going to decide what type of operating system based on two criteria. We want to be able to use Linux for schoolwork and for other instructional purposes, and we also want to use it as a media player. This recording is being done, just so you know, in what's called Skype for Business recording. If you want to set up a meeting, I'd be happy to show you how to do that. You need to install Skype for Business, which is available for all students at the college. This is a different version than the regular Skype that you use at home, and only available when you log in with your school credentials. The first step to setting up a Raspberry Pi is to pick an SD card. Now, as you can see, the typical card I buy based on price and performance is a 32 gigabyte card, and I use a UHC class type 1, which runs at about 10 megabytes per second. Anything slower than that and any type of disk operations are going to be extremely slow. This is similar to the difference between buying a 5400 RPM hard drive for your computer or a 7200. There are faster ones out there. There's a new V90, V30 classes. Those are very expensive right now. Even the UHC3 gets kind of pricey. So you want to stick to 10 megabytes per second, which is your transfer rate, which, as you can see, is good for 4K video, HD video, or standard video. If you want 8K, you got to move something faster. Not a lot of video has been recorded in 8K yet, and I'm sure, as everything else, prices will drop over time. So a UHC1 device is your best bet at this point. I use 32 gigabytes based on price. You could go as low as an 8 gigabyte drive, and any of the operating systems should install on an 8 gigabyte. And I also have a 128 gigabyte SD card. Now, these are micro SD cards. And as you can see in the picture on the right, we have the adapters. These adapters are what you plug the micro SD card into, so it'll plug into a standard port on your computer or laptop. The first step is to make sure you don't have any existing partitions on the drive, because when we go to write it, we want a blank, clean drive with no existing partitions. You will get to that step in a little bit. So the first thing you do is plug it into your computer. There's two ways to do this. This is the easiest way, which you see on the left here. You plug it in, you'll see disk 1 appear. 29.72 gigabytes is really a 32 gig card, depending on if you're using 1000 megabytes or 1024 megabytes. This is what it shows in Windows. And as you can see on this card here, we have 3 existing partitions. So we want to delete those, and to delete those, you simply, in Disk Manager, you right-click on them one at a time. You'll see the prompt here that says Delete Volume, and simply delete them from left to right. And then you'll see that there's unpartitioned space appears on the left once you delete the partitions. That usually works. Sometimes it does fail, depending on how the card is partitioned. Different operating systems have different things that Windows don't recognize, so sometimes this fails. The only big recommendation I say is make sure you're deleting the partition only on the SD card. If I were to, for example, delete something on my disk 0, this is my Windows computer, it'll probably give me an error on drive C, but I also have another partition hidden behind this window here that is my data drive, which has all my media and video files. If I deleted that, I would instantly lose everything on the disk. So make sure you're doing only the SD card. The best way, if you're in doubt, it says right here, take the card out. You'll see it disappear from the screen that you're looking at, and then put the card back in, and you'll see it appear again. Then you know you're definitely on the right one. So just left to right, you delete the 3 until all you have is unpartitioned space. This does fail on occasion. It did fail when I was setting this up. So you have another way of doing it from a command prompt, And I know we're all studying command prompt commands, so this is a good instructional way of doing it. I find it's actually sometimes easier. It's just a little hard to do and hard to remember the exact sequence of commands. But simply you run diskpart. Type in diskpart. It's actually diskpart.exe that you're running from a command line. And you'll get this window to come up and you'll see your prompt changes to diskpart right here. The next command you run is list disk, and it shows you what disks you have available. So I have my disk 0, which you'll see is my C drive here, and I have disk 1. Now when I filmed this, I had two different cards in here. This was actually a 16 gig card, which is showing up as 14 gig on diskpart. And all I do is I go select disk 1, and you'll see the comment come up, disk 1 is now the selected disk, and you just type in the word clean. And what it does is wipes out those 3 partitions and it gives you unused space. Everything is unused. And you'll get the message, and that's simply it. You could type in exit, and then you get out. Again, if you're not sure, if you remove the card from your computer, do a list disk a second time, you'll see disk 1 will disappear. Plug the card back in again, do another list disk, and you'll see disk 1 appears, and then you can run your select disk 1, and you can run your clean command. And that's it, just to make sure that everything is empty. The next part is deciding which operating system you want to use. And this was the hardest thing that we found. We use several different operating systems. You can actually, because of the ease of the system, if you have multiple cards, like I showed in the screen before, you can take one operating system and set it up for Ubuntu Mate, which is version 16.04 of Ubuntu. Or you could set it up for a Windows IoT core. Now, remember, this is IoT core. There's no graphical interface on this. It's simply sort of like you have a DOS command prompt, and everything runs that way. Not particularly useful for most people at this point. Ubuntu is far superior when it comes to running a Raspberry device. There's a version that says Noobs, which comes with most of the devices. It's a nice graphical interface and easy to use. There's another one called Raspbian or Raspberry Pi Desktop. What we found in our testing was that the Noobs and the Raspbian software did not play videos very well. To play videos, you wanted to use one of two things. Xbian, which you see down here, the big X, Xbian is the name of the operating system. If you simply want to do graphics and not use the device for anything else, that's an excellent operating system. It comes up, it runs through and scans your drives for any videos, any music. Total, simple, media-based application. And that runs great. The problem was we wanted to use it for other things. We wanted to use Mate. Mate was easier to install the video drivers on. And as you'll see later on, we use the 7-inch video monitor, which is non-standard for Raspberry. So we had to install the video drivers. In any case, once you pick your operating system, you move on to the next step. The operating system will come as a zip file. If you'll see, it says here an image file. And what you want to do is right-click it. You want to get the 7-zip program first. 7-zip is kind of like WinZip, but it works for a bunch of different compression systems. It works on .rar files, all types of systems. And generally, most of the images you're going to download requires a different unzipping program from WinZip or the inherent Windows-based zipping program. So what you want to do is just take your image file, right-click it. You'll see after you install 7-zip, and it does make you reboot when you install it. After you install 7-zip, you'll see it when you right-click on a file. It says 7-zip right there. And you can simply say extract files. It runs similar to WinDisk in that way. You can tell it where to extract it to. And all you're doing is simply taking a compressed version and expanding it so it's something that we can install on our Raspberry Pi SD card. The next part is to actually write the image. Now that you have the image there, there's another program that we had to install called Win32 Disk Imager. And if you want the documentation, we have that, and it gives you the website that you can go to get it. It's a very simple program. It runs in Windows. After you install it, it doesn't need you to reboot. The one thing you have to remember is your image file is going to be on your C drive or on another drive. The device that you're writing to is over here, E. In this case, that's the micro SD card after I put it in the PC. You definitely don't want to overwrite an existing operating system. You don't want to overwrite your media drive. You don't want to overwrite your C drive, certainly. So you want to make sure you're picking the device that the card exists on. And again, look in my computer, take the card out, put the card back in, you'll know exactly which letter it's at. This little folder here allows you to simply browse to wherever your image file is. The right key, once you have everything set up, you'll see the right button here will be lit up, and you hit write. And that will write the image out to the card. It'll set up the partitions for you, and the card will be good to go and ready to install into the Raspberry Pi. The next part is your physical connections. As you see here, the Raspberry Pi is very small by itself. It's about the size of a credit card, but you need a lot of other things to go with it. As you can see, I wrote power, power, power. Once you plug in, like say I plugged in my external hard drive into the Raspberry Pi, it's very power sensitive. If you underpower it, you're going to see a little lightning bolt come on. You'll be low on power. If you plug something else in, the unit simply shuts off because it doesn't have enough power to run the operating system. So I recommend at least a 2-amp power supply. These white Galaxy power supplies work very well. It's a standard phone power supply, a standard micro USB adapter. You could buy the ones from Raspberry Pi, but the odds are you have some of these laying around at home and you really don't need to go out and purchase another one. You also can run this on an external battery pack that you use to power your phone when it's dead. Again, if you buy a little small one, it's not going to power your device properly. I did find a couple out there that were reasonably priced. They were about $40, $35 to $40. And you can buy one that will power your Raspberry Pi. They last between 2 and 4 hours, depending what you're doing on it. As you can see, I put 2 power supplies on, though, because besides power for the device and the hard drive, you're also going to need power for a speaker and a monitor. Monitor is optional. We'll get to that in a little bit. But certainly a speaker and any other device that you put on, you want that to be on a separate power supply from the one running your Raspberry. I used a very basic extension cord to plug these into. There's a million ways to plug it in. I put it all into this box that I bought, and I'll be showing you that in class, just so everything was in one place. Now, power it up. You do have the option, there is repartitioning software that will allow you to make the default boot drive a little bit bigger. In case you need a lot of software installed, you might want to install a web server on there. You could get a repartitioning software and just repartition it so the boot drive isn't as small as it comes by default. But in any case, generally you just power it up and you start using it. You figure out what you want to put it in. You want to figure out what operating system you want to use. There's a bunch of different ones. As you can see here, there's a Pi Hacker software, Minecraft Raspberry software, RetroPie, which is good for playing video games. And you could take the RetroPie and actually build it into an arcade machine, as you see on the bottom left. Robotics use the Raspberry Pi a lot. I know one of the other engineering classes actually built a race car using a Raspberry Pi. I think in the club that we want to put together, one of the projects we're looking to do at some point is to actually see if we could hack the Raspberry Pi race car that they built, see if we could hack that while it's running. That'll be a fun project if it gets off the ground. The other thing, as you can see, you can make your own Raspberry Pi case out of a piece of cardboard. It's very easy. All the dimensions are online if you want to look it up. It's nothing to hold. It's a little tiny light piece of circuitry, and you could build it into anything. They have the new Raspberry Pi X out, which is even smaller and doesn't need a lot of space. It's virtually a flat card. The last step you want to do, if you do plug it in and you buy the video card, I have a 7-inch in the model I have in class. There is an 11-inch display that doesn't come with the default Raspberry Pi software. You have to get the drivers for it. So very simple. We got the newest driver by running the git clone command, and you're basically adding github.com and giving it the pathway to find the drivers. And you're going to run it, and it's going to actually download the drivers for you once it's in the path. And then you'll run the chmod command, and then you're just going to run it, run cd lcd show, and that's actually installing the software. The last thing you want to do is the software is for various versions from this manufacturer. So I had to run sudo lcd7b show. 7b is the size of the monitor. It's 7, and the B represents an 800 by 400 video resolution. And that's it. If you have any questions, if you want to come over and look at it, I'll show you how to remove and re-add the other micro SD cards. If you want to swap out the software, it takes a second. It's pretty easy. I have a copy of the lab written up for you. We could send you that. I have a general overview of how to do it. The links that we got to get, raspberrypi.org, 7-zip, Win32 disk manager, some other things that you could do on it, Kodi.tv, Twitch.tv, and these are the actual instructions. Download and install it, run the Win32 disk manager, and the different images that you have, the disk partitions commands are there, and how to install the video drivers. And again, once you buy it, you could wipe the card, you could re-image it, you could buy another card. There's tons and tons of options in how to set up a Raspberry Pi, probably limited only by your imagination. Thank you, and have a good day.